Good morning and welcome to Eds World, where it's always morning, even in the afternoon. My name is J Edgar, and I am joined today by someone shrouded in mystery. I am joined today by the Analytical chick, or AC, as we're going to be talking throughout the rest of the show. AC, welcome to Eds World.
Hi, well, welcome my viewers to Eds World, and thanks for welcoming me.
Before we get started today, I want to touch on just a couple of things that have happened over here in Ed's World and some of the things that we've done. If you didn't see already, I participated in a debate over on the Generational Gaps live stream. I have put that debate up to audio. By the time this hits the video stream, it'll actually be up on audio. It's not quite there yet, but by Tuesday morning, it'll be there ready for everybody to listen to. I hope you'll go back and listen to that. And I hope you'll go back and check out the entire 12-hour live stream from the Generational Gap. It was a really good time. And I actually appeared on a couple of other segments that they blocked out as well. So it was good. We raised $700 for St. Jude's, and a good time was had by all.
What was your debate topic?
The meaning of the Second Amendment in the modern world. We were
Very
both
cool.
Second Amendment advocates, but we disagree on what it means in today's world. So we got together and talked about that.
Very cool. Very cool.
Uh, we're going to be talking, we've got a pretty dense topic load today. We actually had a lot going on this week. It's been a busy week. Uh, the Notre Dame Cathedral went down this past week and broke a lot of hearts all across Europe and all across America. So we're going to be talking about some of the things that came out about that right away. As everybody knows, since most of this has happened last week, the Mueller report dropped and many people started reading about this. I'm only a couple pages in on this point. I just downloaded it last night because of work and the debate schedule, so I haven't read it yet. Have you read it yet?
I didn't read it. I've watched some videos that YouTubers have done about it, but that's about it.
Well, we'll sit down and we'll talk about what we've seen so far out of this and what we've got for initial reactions. A topic that AC is actually going to be leading for us today. There was a church bombing in Sri Lanka just yesterday morning. I haven't had a chance to see a lot of details about that, so I will be relying on my guest's expertise, and we'll talk about that a bit. A
All right.
teenager copycatting the Columbine, or attempting rather to copycat the Columbine attack from when I was still in high school. Traveled to Denver, was caught with it, and was found dead afterwards. We're going to talk a little bit about that and what that means for the communities of Denver, Columbine, and the rest.
Right.
As we always do on Ed's World, we will be talking 2020. We'll be talking about how the Miller probe changed all of this, Warren's push for the House to impeach, and we'll talk a bit about Bernie Sanders being on Fox News, and we'll actually sit down and analyze some of some of the people that really don't have any business being in the race right now. It
That's
is
all.
going. It is going to be all of this and more as we go along on Ed's World. Thanks for subscribing on YouTube. Make sure you hit the like button if you like what you see. And if you're over on the audio platforms, make sure you subscribe there as well. If you are on iTunes, please leave us a 5-star rating and a good review. That helps us move up the charts. Before we get into the topics, though, let's start by talking about the most important part of Ed's World. AC, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I got into YouTubing. Originally, I watched YouTube channels, and then I broke out my own channel August of 2017. It was a lot of the stuff going on in San Francisco that got me started. All of a sudden, I was like, holy cow, there's commies, real live commies throwing M80s at people in San Francisco. So that was an eye opener, and I ended up all over the political YouTube channels, and here I am today.
Hmm. All right. So I see. What made you decide to actually get into making videos for YouTube then? Was it
Well,
just
well,
that specific
well,
topic, or?
well, like I said, from that topic, I was diving deeper and deeper to learn more about what happened. So I started subscribing to channels, and then So that was like early 2017, like 2 years ago. And then about August of 2017, I decided to make my own channel. I guess the main incident was there was an imam out in California who was calling for jihad against the Jews, and it was hardly being covered. And I was like, I want to cover this, and then I want to grow following so that if something like this happens again, people will actually hopefully hear about it. So here I
Well,
am.
well, that's good, and it's great that you've joined yourself onto our community. We're always glad to have you here. If you're ready with everything else, let's start down into our topics list then for the day.
Right. We're going to start with Notre Dame, the cathedral. And
Yes.
just a side note, I'm also going to be putting this on my channel, which is Analytical Chick. So if you're watching this and you're on my channel and you're like, wait, what's going on? This is originally recorded for Ed's channel, but it's also going to be on my channel. Okay, take it away, Ed.
Okay. On Tuesday morning, the news broke that the Notre Dame Cathedral was on fire, and everybody was talking about
That
the
was Monday.
was. Oh, that's right.
Last
That was
Monday.
Monday. I apologize.
Yeah.
Okay, that was on Monday morning. The news broke that the Notre Dame Cathedral was on fire, and instantly everybody started having their own commentary about it. I was actually listening to Limbaugh when it was happening, and he was already making grand theories about what was happening and why it was happening. For the most part, nobody seems to know what happened. There have been ideas and some investigations that have gone out to show that a fire has started in two places. But,
Two
again,
places.
for the most.
I didn't know that. I didn't know it was two places. That makes me even more suspicious. Continue, Ed.
Well, there have been some major conspiracy theories that started that were even starting even before the wood was cold yet. So, what have you seen
Well,
about
it
this
took
so
a while
far?
for it to get cold.
What's
I,
that?
if I'm not mistaken, they took their sweet time getting a firefighter there to actually put the stupid thing out.
Well, yeah, climate change. It might affect the atmosphere. What have you seen about this so far? What do you want to talk about on this to start with?
My understanding is that the mainstream media is saying, "Oh, it was an accident," and a lot of people on the right are saying that it might have been a fire of peace. And I say the idea that it was an accident. I'm not really buying it. I mean, I can't really prove it, but I don't really buy it. There's not really anything I can do about it, you know, but personally I don't buy it.
Why? Whatever do you mean when you say fire of peace?
Oh, you know what I mean.
I do. That's that has been part of what's been going on. I mean, people are flying conspiracy theories completely left and right about all of this. This person was seen going in and out of this place. This might have been one person. This might have been another person. But I mean, for the most part, even when it was going, people are always say, "Oh, well, a construction worker was being careless with a torch," or it was an electrical fire from
I
the
just
13th century electrical.
I just find it very suspicious that the fire was still burning and they were already like, it was an accident. Like, how do you know that when there's no way anybody's been able to get in there to inspect to see what happened? It it just seems like the usual with the mainstream media wanting to put down some propaganda against the people. So the fact that they came out with that so quickly, and also given the demographics of Paris, I'm suspicious. I can't. It's not like I can like prove it. I don't know about. I guess Paul Joseph Watson or Mike. No, Mike Cernovich. I'm sorry. Posted some video of like, oh, well, no workers. Well, who's this? I mean, when they said no workers, they meant no construction workers. But then that makes me, if there was no construction workers, then how was it a construction accident? I'm just like, I don't know. It just, I know how governments are, and I know how they lie to us, and how the propaganda is deep these days. So I just don't buy it. Plain and simple, I don't buy it.
Well, I don't have cable or anything here, so I don't ever really watch cable news. I kind of look at some of the highlights. I read some of the articles afterwards. But from what I was hearing with all this too, people were already talking about the incident the next day, that Tuesday afternoon, on CNN, and somebody was bringing up the fact that uh, there were churches burning all over France, and this might have been a Muslim thing, and they just like cut his mic.
Yeah, that's another reason why I'm suspicious. I mean, I'm well aware of the stuff that has been going on in Paris. I've seen the videos of like the trash and the mattresses all over Paris, and just I just saw one this morning from Martina Marcota, I think it was,
Okay.
um, where she went to Paris and showed videos of like, just the markets going on, and it's they're just not not very French anymore. I don't want to get your channel shut down, so I'm going to be careful about what I say, or my channel. That's
No,
what
that's
I
that's
I
completely
suspect
understandable.
that it was a fire of peace, and I think people know what I mean.
Well, you had said that people were out there saying there were no construction workers. From what I understand, there actually was a construction project or a restoration project that was
Right,
going on in the church at the time.
but I believe that the mainstream media claimed that there was. I mean, I don't watch the mainstream media, but I see a lot of people reacting to it. So,
Hmm.
or at least I try to avoid the mainstream media. Um, I've heard people reacting to it, saying basically like, "No workers, huh?" Like, obviously they're saying that because the mainstream media would be pushing some idea that there were no workers. So I'm sure they meant no construction workers. I don't really know about debunking that. All I'm saying is the whole thing is very suspicious.
Well, I mean, whichever direction this goes, whether or not this was a terror attack or whether this was just a happy
I
accident,
don't
like
think.
people are saying, this is a blow to the West, no matter what.
Oh
That's
yeah,
been
yeah,
the common theme that I've been hearing all about this from the moment the first spark started. That's what I've been hearing. Is this has
yeah.
just been a blow to us.
Well, and it's also kind of symbolic of the fact that people have let religion slip anyway. I mean, are people in general aren't really going to church. Like, you hear, I think it was Blonde said she and her husband went to church last week or the week before or something like that. She said on tonight's podcast or last night's podcast that she and her husband went for Easter, but I think she and maybe Vince from the Red Elephants, like, they've said on podcasts that they go to church and like they're the only young people there. So, I believe it. Um, I mean, that's been going on for a long time. Like, even when I was growing up, I remember when I was like in high school and a little older, it was always on the local news where I grew up. They were always having to shut down Catholic schools. And I grew up in an area that was very, very Catholic. And at one time, there were probably more, like when my mother went to high school, she went to a Catholic school. And I think more students were in Catholic schools than in public schools. It was so incredibly normal when she was growing up for everyone to go to a Catholic school. So, and now people don't really even think of sending their kids. I mean, in the Jewish community, in the Orthodox community, everybody sends their kids to private school for the most part. You're kind of a weirdo if you send your kids to public school. And I believe that's how it used to be with Catholic schools, like back in the 40s and the 50s. And at one time it was not actually that way for Jews. Like there were Jewish schools, but it was a more religious group that sent their kids. It was more average for your average modern Orthodox family. They would send their kids to public school, and then they would go to like a Jewish after school program. And nobody really does that anymore. I mean, part of the reason is there's so much immorality in society. Like, you can't have your kids in a secular school anymore and have them being raised with, morals.
Mm-hmm.
But the vast majority of people who are Catholic have basically left their religion. Like, I mean, I converted to Judaism, and my mom was raised Catholic, went to Catholic school, and I guess technically I was raised Catholic, but like, not really. Like, my mother did not take us to church. I'm getting off topic.
No, it's actually completely understandable because I looked at it from the opposite end. I'm originally from a very small town in northern Wisconsin. I
Right.
don't live in that area anymore, but it was about a 500 student school total between all four grades. And that was only because usually we got 20% of our class every year came over from the Catholic school because there was no Catholic high school, but they had elementary to middle school over
Right.
at the St. Mary's Parish where I grew up. So I'm used to seeing a transition from religious school, parochial school, into secular school, but I understand that entirely as well. And I do see some of the drop off going as well. When I was first when I was first turning 18, you go to church every single week. Yes, it was small town Wisconsin, and that was what you were expected to do. But I mean, you didn't miss it for anything. But as a grown up, some of the things that I've looked at is some of the corruption that's gone through in the human side of the church, not necessarily the corruption of Christ himself, but the humans that talk about him. Sometimes I don't feel that are completely trustworthy in any way, but I think
Are you
there's a
talking about the priests who can't keep their hands to themselves?
well, not just the priests, but the clergy, the superstructure of the church, all of the people up on top, a level of control that goes around there, a level. I've been to churches too where it just seems like unless you were born into the faith, there's no conversion. You're not allowed to do that because you're not pure enough. I'm not going to name any names because one of my best friends goes to one of those churches, but I, I
I I think in general, that's pretty common in religion. That, I mean, even if you're allowed in, I find that socially people stick their nose up at you
mhm.
if you don't come from, like, if you're in the Jewish world, if you're in the Orthodox world, and you're not like raised in an Orthodox family, um, people will be like, "Oh no, we accept them," but at the same time, people don't want their kids. A lot of people don't want to marry somebody who didn't grow up religious, or don't want their kids marrying someone like that. And it's even worse if you converted to Judaism. Like, if you were raised as a secular Jew, um, you'd probably get some people who would reject you, but like being a convert to Judaism, I've gotten a lot of pushback, and they're not supposed to do it, but they do, big time.
Tying that back though into back into the Notre Dame Cathedral, I
Right.
mean, I look back into this and yeah, you're right. Over here on our side, church attendance is down. That there's no question about that.
Right.
Um, when we look at the experience of going to church versus what it is in Notre Dame, I was listening to Matt Walsh talk about this, and I never thought about it so much until he brought it up. But I mean, I look at it. Some of the churches around here are absolutely beautiful. They are 100% beautiful, old style
Pretty
stone
empty on
buildings.
Sunday, aren't they?
What's that?
And pretty empty on Sunday, aren't they?
Not necessarily. I mean, the one that I went to when I still lived down in southeast Wisconsin was usually pretty full when I was going there. That's been a good 10 years at this point. But, I mean, they were pretty. I don't necessarily know how many people are going there to hear the word rather than to have the social experience about it. But where I'm going with that is not necessarily those buildings, the churches that are made up to look like an actual church. I'm looking at all of the rest of the churches out there that are built into a theater or built into a rally hall or built into a factory or a mall or anything like that. I mean, there's we're slipping into a point where there's none of that beauty anymore out there, and the Notre Dame was a beautiful building and had so much history in it. And I think the religious experience of being able to go to something like that would inspire a lot more people to feel that religious feeling than going into a converted mega mall somewhere in Winnipeg, Manitoba, or something like that, which you don't have that beauty, you don't have the relic. I mean, people were risking their lives to go into Notre Dame to get some of these antique relics that cannot be replaced anymore. The Thorn of Crowns was one of them that kept coming up in every single story. You can't replace any of it. There's history there there's an actual
Right. It
connection
was
to the
almost
Christ.
it was almost like it was a museum too,
Yeah. So I
like a
think
two in one building.
I think that's a part of the reason, like especially over here in the States, that some of the attendance is down because we don't have that direct connection to anything like that. And I do feel like that's a part of the reason that having the Notre Dame burned down is such a blow to the West and to the religious community in general because that's one less place that's going to have that kind of history. You can rebuild the Notre Dame, but it's not going to be the same as the ninth century church that stood for years and has stood through everything else.
Right. Yeah.
One
Uh,
one of the things that I noticed while I was looking at the fact that this was burning down, and I didn't realize the Yellow Vest was still going on. It's completely disappeared out of the news up until the Notre Dame started burning down. But I mean, that seemed to kind of put a little bit of pause into these people as well, just at least for a little bit.
I I guess I didn't really I heard a little bit about that. I would say you probably are following this Notre Dame thing more closely than I have been following it.
Well, I'm
Because I mean, the
Protestant,
Mueller
so
report came out, and I was really kind of following that.
yeah. Well, if you want to move on into that, I mean, we've put a good 15 minutes just into the Notre Dame Cathedral as well, and talking about its effect on Western civilization. If you want to talk about Mueller, let's step into that.
Right.
So on Friday, the official release of the redacted version of the Mueller report hit the public for all of us to read. I've actually downloaded a PDF of it for myself, so I will be looking into that. I've already started reading that, but there was a news conference coming up, and there was a hashtag that was going around Twitter that's saying boycott Barr's news conference. So they were already deciding what they wanted to hear about all of this. Congress has
I
reacted
love
to
the way the left talks about boycotting things like Barr's press conference or
big
Tucker
government.
Carlson show. Like, you weren't gonna watch it anyway, so shut up.
Yeah. And I want to touch on that after I'm done teasing this topic here, but yeah, you're right.
Versus the right who says, well, I can't really boycott this because I don't watch it anyway. But they like say boycott this, and it's like, yeah, none of your people watch this. You can't really boycott something if you're not patronizing it at the first place.
Congress has reacted to both chambers of Congress actually have reacted pretty strongly and openly to the Barr release of the Mueller report, and there are going to be some next steps that are going to be coming out of this. I know we'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk in 2020 Watch, but there are going to be some next steps coming out. But going back here to this press conference here, you're absolutely right. The hashtag went around to boycott the Barr press conference, and the first thought that I had was that William Barr is a member of the executive branch of a bloated federal government that most of the people on the left consider to be a part of their religion, the federal government. So I don't know how you're going to boycott the thing that you've built your life around, but yeah, they wanted to boycott that part of it there. So
Well, honestly, one of the other things is I think most Democrats don't really even know what the Democrat Party believes or is behind other than social issues. They are all about the social issues. Conservatives will talk to you about like fiscal and I want low taxes and like they'll talk about social issues and they'll also talk about policy type issues.
mhm.
But for the Democrats, they pretty much are just all about the social issues. Gay rights, trans rights, this rights, that's rights. Oh, they're gonna put children in, whatever the media tells them to get into a tizzy about.
Well, and it's a far cry from the Democrat Party I grew up in. I grew up in a union household over on the Minnesota-Wisconsin border. I grew up voting or not voting Democrat because I was too young to, but I mean, I grew up believing that in the Democrat Party and everything that they stood for at the time. Now, this is completely different because this was the late 80s onto the early 2000s. And yeah, I've seen a stark shift in all of this because I've been watching it from both sides for my entire life. I think you're absolutely right that they don't know what they stand for. They don't know what Democrats actually used to stand for.
Yeah. Well, I can't say that I've been a Democrat my whole life, but my parents were Democrats. And my mother, in particular, she took me to the polls when I was like, I don't know, I'm older than you. It was the first time Reagan was running. And she took me to the polls with her. And as she pushed down the levers, we're going to vote Democrat because we like Democrats. There was like one that like she happened to prefer the Republican, so we voted Republican for that one. But like basically it was like we're a Democrat, we vote Democrat. Oh, this person's running on both parties and we're a Democrat, so we vote for the Democrat. And that's another thing. I don't think you see that anymore where if someone's running unopposed, they run on both parties. They just straight up run unopposed now.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas when I was a child, there were tons of people, not tons, but I mean a lot of these like local offices that nobody except for the major political junkies knows who holds those offices. The people running for those offices, many of those people were running on both the Republican and Democrat line. And I remember this because my mother was like, okay, they're voting for both. We're going to vote as a Democrat because we're Democrats. Like she was instructing me to be a Democrat, but like, even right from then, I was already like, but do I have to just take what my parents vote? Do I have to be, like, very, very early on in my life, I was like, do I have to basically take to whatever my parents' ways of doing things are? And I sort of developed that mindset early on that I'm going to decide for myself. So I was never really a Democrat, even though I grew up in a Democrat household.
Well, you can. I can definitely say that you are a bit older than me then, because I was born under Reagan.
Yeah.
The first president I remember being in office was actually H.W. So.
Ah.
Um,
So, yeah, I was born in the 70s.
let's go back and look at this press conference though here for a sec, because that was something that was talked about immensely from the time that they said that the Mueller report was going to drop. One of the first things that I heard is, if he's going to release the report, why does he have to have a press conference? He's hiding something. That's been the theme that I've heard from every outlet on every side right now is, oh, he's hiding something. He's trying to hide something. He's trying to cover his tracks, and I don't buy it. If he was trying to hide something, we wouldn't be able to download this right from the DOJ's website. which I
What
just did.
you're saying that you heard that from every side, or you heard that from the left?
I heard some of that coming from the right too.
Hmm.
Not as much, but
What kind of the right? YouTubers, Fox News, what?
a couple of Fox News hosts I think were kind of hinting towards that. Some YouTubers, of course, because that's independent articles, blogs, YouTubers is where I get the majority of my news from. Because that's I don't feel as I can trust most of the mainstream media from either Fox, MSNBC, or CNN at this point.
So that sounds very naive to me because I'm pretty sure that's like the standard kind of procedure that they get as the information comes, they let it out. I mean, that's they do press conferences. I didn't it didn't strike me as abnormal or weird that he did a press conference before it came out. It didn't strike me in the least bit weird.
No, and I'm sure that because not everybody reads legalese. I mean, I do a little bit because I've been reading law books since I started doing this channel. I do a little bit of independent law study. I've debated taking the bar as soon as they take the law school requirement out of it. But I read what it means, what the legal terms mean. Not everybody in the country does. William Barr reads that, and you know, for him to do a press conference, that would be a good way for him to go out and translate this for the lay person. This is not him trying to hide something. This is him trying to get more information out there for people who are not going to necessarily be able to look at this document and read it in full as it is.
I mean, yeah, it didn't strike me as weird at all. I mean, if you look at like, of course, Sarah Sanders does press conferences, but like Trump does press conferences, like all kinds of. If you start following politics, like people do press conferences all the time.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these people might be like total political novices, and I'm probably about as much of a political novice, but I would say that maybe I've caught on very quickly that like, okay, this is how things go.
Yeah,
And I think that's pretty much how it goes. I mean, if you think about like all the stuff that like airs on C-SPAN, that you occasionally see it, but like, who sees that? Like when Candace Owens spoke to the committee and everything, they do those hearings like pretty much every day. I mean, I know they have breaks and everything, but when Congress is in session, excuse me, that's what they do. The subcommittees meet with people who give them testimony about various things. There was another one that I watched. It was like Ben Shapiro and Adam Carolla met about like all the campus, plugging up free speech and stuff like that. This was they met with, I think, the House Judiciary. Actually, that's the same committee.
mm-hmm.
But at the time it was under the Republicans. And what was I gonna say? Oh, so I watched the whole hearing of that one. I didn't watch the whole hearing of the Candace Owens one, but I watched bits and pieces. And you see, like, this stuff comes out on our YouTube channels. It's like, I think they're not in session right now, but if they were in session right now today, they'd be having hearings, like about something else. It's just that, a lot of this stuff you don't really necessarily know about. And I like the left probably didn't find out about all of that stuff because it's not their radar. We found out about it because that's in our particular radar. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on that isn't on most people's radar. If I think about when I was politically asleep, so much stuff that was going on that I wouldn't have known about because I wasn't hyper focused on politics the way I am now. And when I see this stuff, like one of the first things that comes in my mind when I'll see like one of these committee meetings or whatever is, oh, all of this stuff, not only does this stuff go on like all the time and I don't know about every single hearing that goes on, but all of this stuff was going on that whole time I was politically asleep.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Barr press conference doesn't seem that weird to me because I'm like, right away when I see this stuff, that's what I think. Oh, all these press conferences, like Sarah Sanders meeting with the press, I watch that and I think I may not have known about it, but all of that time when I was politically asleep, like different press secretaries were meeting with the press then too, in that same room, no less.
Well, I find it interesting that you bring up the fact that there are going to be hearings from Congress, whether or not we see that or not, because even before the Barr redactions went through, the fact that Mueller turned around and turned this over to Barr in the first place, and the fact that he said there was no evidence that he could pursue a collusion charge, or no evidence that he could pursue a obstruction of justice charge, they were ready to actually have a hearing on him right away, and he was supposed to be their hero. And now they want to take him in front of Congress and sit down and grill him for all of this as well.
The left eats their own. I mean, straight up. They're absolute babies. I don't know if the Democrats were always this way. Probably not as bad, but at this day and age, the Democrats are just babies, absolute babies. They're like a 3-year-old throwing a temper tantrum every time they don't get their way. Everything is like pinning hope on how can I get my way. It's so childish.
And it is bleeding over into outside of the party. I think we all saw that coming when Trump was still running for office before he ever took office during the campaigns. We saw some of that, and I think that was part of the reason that he got elected. My mom, lifelong Democrat, a daughter of a union worker, husband or a wife rather of a union worker, told me I was talking to her on the phone while I was on my way to work one day. She doesn't know if she can follow down the path that they're going, and this is somebody who's been voting this way since 1978.
Yeah, my mother, she died in the 90s, but I always like think about the fact that I know she would have voted for Trump. The last election that she voted in, she was like, I told her how she took me to the polls and we vote Democrat, we vote Democrat. And the last election she voted in, she voted for Ross Perot. She could not bring herself to vote for Bill Clinton. And this was the first time he ran, and then she died like a year later. And she couldn't vote for Clinton. She was like, I absolutely cannot back this up with anything, but he gives me the creeps. And so I know, like, if she couldn't vote for him with nothing to back it up just because he gave her the creeps, I can only imagine she wouldn't have voted for Hillary because by then there was more than enough reason to back it up, you know?
I didn't have so much of a problem with Bill. He
We
balanced the
didn't,
budget. He actually had some good policy prescriptions out there, but
he didn't balance the budget. Somebody told me that and I went and looked it up. He didn't balance the budget. I checked. He didn't balance the budget. But I mean, all the stuff that he was doing to the American people didn't really find out about it. It wasn't as in your face as with Obama, but there was a lot of stuff that he was doing besides the stuff with Monica Lewinsky. Um, he did a lot. He signed a lot of bills to change regulations that basically caused the jobs to go overseas.
well, yeah, I remember that, and I was looking into some of those other policy prescriptions as well, and I actually did a pretty in-depth study as to what caused the crash in '08, and I put some stuff onto HW, I put some stuff onto Bill, I went back to Carter. So, yeah, there's some policies from a lot of different people that were causing that, and I can point to a lot of the specific ones that Bill Clinton put into place to do so. But the thing with Bill that I didn't so much have a problem with him as far as against his wife, rather, was we knew what he was going to stand for. He didn't say one thing and then talk outside or out the other side of his mouth. He wasn't doing whatever it took to get elected like Hillary was because all of a sudden she was a union friendly worker Democrat that suddenly turned into another socialist as soon as
She was way worse than her husband.
yeah, yeah, she
I
was.
mean, part of that is, I think under Obama, the Democrat Party got cockier and
Mm-hmm.
cockier because of the margins. He won by really large margins, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes.
So I was Republican, but like barely and mostly politically asleep. So I looked at who was running, and I didn't like either of them. And I had moved the last time I had registered. I registered where I grew up, and I had moved, and I didn't live there anymore. And I was just like, it's not even worth re-registering because I didn't really like either one of them. So I didn't vote at all. I didn't re-register to vote. And then same thing with the second one, and then after that I was like, okay, things are getting so bad. Hopefully, I was ready to watch the primaries, which I had never watched. Never, the primaries were never on my radar. It was just like I only voted or even considered voting when it was time for president. Now I vote local elections and special elections, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
like hyper tuned in. So it's a big difference for me. It's a little off topic, but anyway.
I was gonna say we're starting to push up a little bit against the clock here, so let's go back. Well, I know we talked about one of the reactions from Congress and the fact you that's kind of how we got into all this was you had said that they were being big babies about the fact they were going to bring Mueller up and grill him onto this. But what else have you seen coming out of Congress over these last few days? And I know we're going to talk about Warren's reaction down when we talk 2020, but just the reactions from Congress, from the fresh faces, from everybody else that the cameras are pointed at in our House of Representatives now.
I mean, you put reactions from Congress at this point, like, I almost don't even distinguish between Democrats in Congress and the left stream media. Basically, I know that there's been a lot of just, oh look, he's not he's like when I'm getting into it, or like I have one particular far left nut job on Facebook who's a Facebook friend of mine, um, who always posts this stuff, and he keeps pointing out that he's not exonerated, and you hear that a lot from them.
Well, he's not supposed to be exonerated. Mueller is a
Yeah, I
prosecutor.
know. I know that, and you know that, but this is something that like the left stream media is hounding on, and I'm guessing that the members of Congress are hounding on it too. I believe I've been seeing Nadler and Blumenthal have been in the news. I think that's about the Mueller report. So at some point, at one point it sort of all becomes a blur, but I know
Mm-hmm.
that I've been seeing clips from them a lot. So they're probably even the same clips, but like it all becomes a blur. But I mean, it's just this, you know, are people talking about suing Trump or suing Mueller, and well, oh yeah, they want to bring Mueller before Congress because they didn't get the answer they wanted, and then now Mueller's supposed to be a Russian. It's just, oh well, if I don't get my way, someone's a Russian bot. They're insane.
Rashida and Ilhan have both come up with the idea that now they have everything that they need to try and push the impeachment of the president, which I
Yeah.
saw both of them tweet that, and the first thing that I said when I saw that was, do it. Put your cards on the table. I want to see what you've got.
Oh yeah, AOC actually. Now it's coming to me. AOC was in a press conference talking. I mean, they have not stopped. The Democrats haven't stopped talking about impeachment. They started talking about impeachment before he even took office.
Mm-hmm.
Once he won, I think even before he won, they were like, if he wins, we're going to impeach him. And then he won, and they started talking about impeachment, and they haven't stopped.
We're going to get in
They
there.
haven't
Bullies
stopped.
don't win. We're going to impeach the motherfucker.
Yeah, exactly. I wasn't sure if we could curse on your channel, but
Oh
yeah.
yeah, oh yeah. We have the E on the on Apple, so be yourself.
Yeah, it's lame. I mean, as soon as the new ones got into office, I mean, that's some of these people. That's what they campaigned on. They campaigned on, and I recently sent a copy to someone of um somebody from my area goes to all these political events and they record it and they put it. A lot of the events are like nonpartisan events, but he also goes to like Democrat, um, the local Democrat club and stuff, and he'll record stuff like that. And all of this stuff that he posts, like the stuff that is partisan, all they talk about is, oh my gosh, Trump.
Hmm.
We have to take back the hat. Wait, no, they have the House. We have to take back the Senate. We have to take back the presidency. Like they are just so they don't stop talking about it and then congratulating themselves for taking over like the New York State Senate. And I believe they took over the New York State Assembly as well. But like they're power hungry. They want it all and they're just bitter that they didn't win these elections. And Republicans should really hear this stuff and hear how hungry they are. We need to be this hungry to keep everything in check because these people, like, we're fair when we're in power.
Hmm.
They're not. If they took everything, they would probably go after every registered Republican and put us into a FEMA camp or something. Like it's very scary what they would do to us. I wouldn't put it past them.
Well, yeah, and I just the
And they
video that
won't
I put out
let us
yesterday.
on camera.
Did
Sorry,
you did you see the video I put out yesterday? I was pretty
I,
late, so
I
you
did not. I did not. I'm sorry. I'm a
that
bad guest.
well, the girl that I had on a few weeks ago had never even seen the show, so don't worry about that part of it.
I watched the version of you and Matt Christensen. Very very nice guest that you nagged there or nailed there. Lucky you.
Well, we've been talking about it for a year. It's just I lived with my ex when I first asked, and then I had poor internet connection. We had a hangout for because I give or donate to him, so he gives me a
Ah,
hangout every month. We lost connection 4 times in the hangout, so I wanted to make sure everything there was set up before I actually hosted the guy too.
very very cool.
So
Yeah,
we've been talking about that for a while.
I posted that on their Discord server and the New York City Beauty and the Beta Discord server as well.
Well, thank you for
So
that.
I don't know if you got any subscribers from it, but I posted it for you.
I think I did.
Ah, cool.
But where I was going with the video that I put out last night is, I think you're absolutely right. If they took the power like that, because I haven't read the report yet, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the Orwellian ideas that they've been putting out about, you know, no matter what they do, they're going to find a crime that Trump has committed. They're not going to stop investigating him until they do that. And Trump,
Or
he's
until he gets out of office.
yeah, and he's a
That
man of
might
means. He
spend
can get a lawyer and
8 years
defend himself.
total. I'm sorry. I was going to say they might spend 8 years total investigating the man.
But he's a man of means. He can defend himself. And I said the same thing about Nielsen when I talked about her being fired. And they're trying to do the same thing, make sure that she can never work again. And these are people of means that, Nielsen could probably close to retire at this point. She's a little young based on what I'm pretty sure her salary was and what she had for savings. I don't think she could quite make it to the end of her life, but she could be comfortable for a little while if she didn't have or couldn't work or do anything for a while. What happens when they turn this around on others of us? People who aren't necessarily people of means, people who are living middle class, even up to upper middle class in the middle of the country. And yeah, you're right. Maybe they're not going to throw us into camps, but bring me the man and I'll find you the crime. Bring me the dissenter and I'll find a way to silence his voice.
It's their attitudes very scary, very scary.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know if you want to talk about Sri Lanka.
Yeah, we should probably get ready to go start moving along. And this is something you added to the show notes too. So this had just happened. I haven't had a chance to read anything about it. I know the bodies are still warm, so I don't want to go too deep into this. I'll probably touch more on it with my guest next week. But why don't you lead us into what we know so far?
I mean, there's not much to tell, but there were, I guess, three churches and some hotels that got hit with bombs of peace. Wink, wink. And also on Easter, and these idiot Democrats are tweeting it out about how these were Easter worshipers instead of saying Christians.
Yeah, I
And
saw that. That is something I wanted to touch on too.
so that's like one of those aftermath. The Democrats are crazy things, but I mean, and it's funny because Sri Lankans, they're Christians, but they're brown. But it doesn't count that they're brown because they're Christians, so that negates the fact that they're brown.
I
We
didn't know
can't
that was how
care
that
about,
worked.
the left is always like, oh, we care about the brown people. You guys are racist. Well, what? So actually, yeah, the left racist white supremacists for not caring more about the brown Christians from Sri Lanka. Thank you very much.
You said that this was a bomb of peace. Are there any confirmations as to what happened there? Because that's one thing I've been kind of paging over to see what we had for confirmation, if they had anybody in custody or any leads at all.
I think they have people in custody, and I'm pretty sure that even the left is admitting that. So, the left likes to not admit these things.
Right.
Like with Notre Dame, we all suspect it was a fire of peace, but the left is not admitting that. In this case, I believe the left is admitting that they were bombs of peace.
Okay.
So that's pretty much all there is. I mean, there's not much info on the story. If you want to tell me all about this Teen Columbine thing.
Yeah, and on the Treeline, I'm sure that Carly and I are actually going to talk about this because I've got a rather religious minded guest coming on next week. So I'm sure that this is going to be on her radar. I know it's on mine. So I'm sure that this is a developing story, and we are going to get further
Plus,
into
there'll be
this.
more info. It just happened yesterday.
Yep. Yeah, like I said, the bodies are still warm.
On Monday.
Yep.
And I think you said you put it out tomorrow morning.
Yeah, it'll be out Tuesday morning. So yeah.
Yeah. So you're going to tell me about this Teen Columbine thing.
Yes. This past, what day was it? Wednesday. Yes, this past Wednesday, I was on the phone again with my mom on my way to work. We were talking about the reactions that were coming out about the Mueller report before it happened. Because I've got a 40-minute drive to work every day, so we talk about some of these things. And my mom mentioned to me the fact that there was something that was going on in Columbine, and it had to do with Columbine, and there might have been another shooter going on. There was a big manhunt going on. And I hadn't heard anything about it. So I got to work and got everything set up, and I just turned over to my favorite news website, and I started looking at it, and sure enough, there was a young Hispanic girl from Miami who had become obsessed with the idea of Columbine. A lot of her friends and people around her said that she had talked at length about the shooting, and some of them were worried that she was going to perpetrate something down there in her hometown. But instead, on Wednesday, she took a I guess they didn't say how she got there. I was about to say she took a flight, but they didn't really say how she got there. I assume she drove because she had guns with her. She wouldn't have been able to do anything like that in Colorado itself. But yeah, she was. They found out that she was in Denver. They found out that she had been targeting and visiting some of these schools, especially Columbine and some of the Denver schools. Go ahead.
Where was she from again?
Miami.
Miami. So Miami to Denver?
Yeah.
Not that crazy. Okay, continue.
Suddenly, and I'm not 100% sure on the details of what happened. The story disappeared out of the news fairly quickly. Suddenly, there was a manhunt out there for this girl who was considered to be armed and extremely dangerous with a shotgun. They were searching all over the Denver area and up through the mountains. And I talked to a coworker who's actually been out to Colorado area, and he said that there was a lot of area for them to search. So
Ooh.
God bless them for the fact that they were out searching for there. And eventually they found her dead to an unknown cause in the foothills of Denver. But all the schools in Denver area, especially Columbine, were on lockdown. Nobody was out allowed in or out at all for any of this. And this was happening just a few days before the 20th anniversary of the shooting itself.
Hmm. But by the way, I'm sure Justin Trudeau would correct you and say that it was a people hunt.
What are you talking about?
No, you remember when he was like,
I
"Oh,
do.
we don't say mankind, we say people kind." So a people hunt, not a manhunt.
I do remember that. I like that.
And it's kind of another interesting commentary that comes out of this is I think this is the second time we've had a female who has attempted to be a mass shooter. I guess no, the Iranian was a mass shooter. She shot like 3 people.
Hmm.
And that's very unusual because prior to the Iranian, I believe they were saying she was the first one.
Hmm.
Or at least the first one acting alone, not acting with like a boyfriend or a husband or whatever.
Right.
So it says something about women becoming more, I don't want to say masculine, but maybe like hard in personality, and hardened to the world and stuff. Like rough around the edges. Well, not even. It's a little more than just rough around the edges.
Oh, absolutely.
But the idea that females are basically taking on these roles that females just didn't take on at one point. It's interesting.
Well, it's interesting to me because when you start reading more about this, you realize the fact that this was not an uncommon thing. I mean, there have been copycats and people who've been obsessed with the idea of going and shooting up the school, looking at these kids that shot up their school in 1999 as an example. And I mean,
Do they know how old she was, this woman?
18.
Ah. So she's too young to have grown up with Columbine itself. But I
Yeah,
guess,
absolutely.
see, that was after I graduated high school, but I think since then it's sort of become a thing.
Hmm.
Like, I remember One Tree Hill did an episode with a school shooter. And, they put it into the culture like that. I'm sure there's other TV shows that like did an episode on it. And at one point I said something to a woman that was just kind of an acquaintance. She's a teacher, and she got really offended very quickly and kind of flipped out, and she's like, "You don't understand. We have a button at my school where da 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 they can just press a button." I'm like, "Yeah, but has anyone ever had to use that button?" She totally didn't miss my point. And my whole point was that it happens a little bit, but it's like the media covers it so much. And all these TV shows feature like fake ones, and then the kids start to have drills, and it becomes part of the culture. Can you imagine if it happened and the media didn't report it? Nobody'd know. A second one might have never happened. You know what I'm saying?
I do know what you're saying, and I understand that almost personally. When I first started my channel, it was right after Parkland had happened, and one of the first videos that I put out was I was actually having a discussion about what had happened when I was in high school, a year after Columbine, when my friend never did make a threat, but he got pushed to the edge. He'd been being bullied. He got pushed to the edge, and he started screaming all kinds of things that were mostly unintelligible at the time. And the next day, there was a massive sit-in because everyone thought that he was going to come back, or not a sit-in, but a walkout from the school because everybody thought that he was, now that he was allowed back into school, he was going to come back and shoot the place up. So, I mean, the whole idea of the school shooting it's got a near and dear place to my heart because I made my first speech defending him in front of my entire school that same day, the same day that they had the walkout, and that may be part of what took me down the path that we're sitting here right now on. But just the fact, yeah, that was only a year after that happened, and the media was reporting so much on that, and reporting on the bullying and the fact that this was an outcast, and now everybody assumes that everybody who's an outcast is going to come back and do that, where we didn't have a problem with that for 40 years in the public school system anywhere prior to that.
Well, I mean, if you think about, like, we had outcasts when I was growing up, and they didn't go and shoot up the school. Like, um, it also ties into the fact that kids are getting coddled by their parents and even the system now. If you look at this whole No Child Left Behind Act that basically says they can't fail a kid. The kid could completely and totally not do any work, not show up. They could literally not show up to class the entire year. And the teacher cannot fail them. Which would have been unheard of when I was growing up.
Mm-hmm.
You don't do an assignment, you get a 0 factored in for that. That's the other thing, is when I went back to college later on as an adult, people figured, oh, if I don't do an assignment, they just base all my assignments on all the other assignments and average those, instead of averaging a 0 in for an assignment you don't do.
Mm-hmm.
They just expected this, and I'm like, I thought it was insane, and it was just a major eye-opening to the difference in, I mean, I was going to school with millennials, and
Yeah.
I'm Gen X. So, and some things are getting better with Gen Z, but some things are probably getting worse.
Well,
I
Gen
think,
Z is for the most part, I think, holding themselves to a higher standard because their
yeah,
parents weren't
exactly.
holding them to a higher standard, and they need that boundary.
Um, and also they're pushing the limits on all this ridiculous stuff so much that a lot of the kids are even like, the teachers, and some of the teachers, I think, have lost their credibility because it's so crazy. Like, when you have teachers who are basically telling kids, okay, let's learn about gender fluidity in class. You might have been born in the wrong body. And I know you have a wee wee, but you might actually be a woman. Like, I think kids, you just can't tell kids this because they're not stupid, and it's at an area where, I mean, some of these kids are so indoctrinated to this stuff, like, where they're like, yes, I know I can be 72 genders, like I would have been growing up. If a teacher said, okay, do you look before you cross the street, we'd have been like, yeah, we know. Do you leave the building when the fire alarm goes off? Yeah, we know. Like, that's how these kids are. Like, I saw a clip, I think it was on a Hunter Avalon video, and the kids in the classroom were like, yeah, we know, like, oh, come on, we know all this. But at the same time, I can imagine that the kids are kind of secretly like, this teacher is insane, telling people that they can just decide to be female.
Well, I mean, I'm pretty sure I was born in the wrong body. I'm pretty sure I'm supposed to be 6'4" and have Dwayne Johnson style shoulders.
Yeah, you should sue the NBA and tell them that you identify as a tall black man, and they better give you a job. Actually, I could do that too. I identify as a 7'1" tall black man, and I demand that the NBA give me a job, or my feelings are going to be hurt. I mean, that's the insanity we're basically dealing with.
Well, I find it interesting that you bring up the fact that, I mean, all the reporting is going out about this, and that may be causing that. Because, I mean, that was going back onto the school shooting thing, it was wall to wall when Nicholas Cruz shot up that school in Parkland, and of course now we all have to deal with tweets from David Hogg for the rest of our lives because he's still somehow relevant. I don't know how, but I mean that kid is a bully. That kid is a prime example of why stuff like this happens. It's not always just the reporting, it's the fact that the reporting builds up these bullies, and the bullies are always the accepted person in society, in major society, and now he's got a voice.
Well, another thing I would actually point out also, I'm not Gen Z, but obviously, but I mean, I wonder how much these high school kids were getting all the garbage from their teachers. I mean, we know that they have all these walkouts that the kids are encouraged to take part in. Magdalene talks about grade docking when she was in high school. Like, if you grow up in a left wing area, even growing up in a right wing area, I think the kids are getting it from their teachers.
What do
Because
you mean? What do you mean when
the
you say grade docking?
um I'm not sure exactly, but I think like maybe it's specifically like there was a kid who had to write about their favorite politician, and they chose to write about Trump.
They're
And
not allowed to. I think I heard about this.
yeah, and I think the teacher said they couldn't, and then they said they were going to do it anyway. I'm willing to bet you if this kid does this project and turns it in, they're going to get a low grade.
Oh yeah, the personal politics of my generation are leaking down into the next generation, or they're trying to, but they're looking back at my generation as well, and I think some of us took the time and looked back at the generation before us. The line between the boomers and Generation X was just littered with divorce here, there, left, and right. I know, in the small town I grew up in, I didn't see a lot of divorce in the growing up, but that's because it was a small town and you were still judged by that. You get down over into the other side of the state where I lived for 10 years, or even when I lived out in Boston. I mean, divorced stepdad, stepmom, second stepdad. That was all a big thing coming up out of that line between your generation and the generation before. And it just amplified with my generation. And,
Right.
now the Gen Zers are starting to see the failures of our generations just prior to them and say, well, I don't want to have three kids with three different fathers and work in a convenience store and try to make ends meet. Because it sucked growing up.
Um, I mean, my generation. Well, I was going to say my parents were silent generation,
Mm-hmm.
not boomers, but the very, very end of it.
Mm-hmm.
And they were divorced, and it was kind of unusual where I lived. And the teachers like gave me a hard time. Now, my mother, her thing was, I'm not going to bring a strange man into this house while you're growing up. So she dated, but like I didn't meet her boyfriend until like they weren't even dating anymore and I was in high school. And then she like took me to a party with her friends one summer and I actually met the guy and she was like, "Oh yeah, we were actually dating." Cuz he'd call sometimes and we'd be like, "Sully's on the phone." And she would be like, "We're just friends. We're just friends. We're not dating. We're not dating." And then when I was a teenager, she was like, "Yeah, we were actually dating, even though I told you we weren't."
Well, and that's just on the opposite side of it. I mean, I did not get married young,
Well,
and I
my
dated.
dad, on
Yeah.
the other hand, he had he had a girlfriend that he shacked up with for 7 years, and she brought her kids to live with us. Well, one of them was out of the house, so it was like one of her sons who was in high school, and I was like 10. And then that ended, and then he had another girlfriend who had her own place for a while, and then eventually she moved in with my dad. So then she had to bring her kid. He was actually like 25 or something like that. He was a real loser. He had no job. She had to bring him to live with us. And then that ended. And then when he actually married, the next one, he actually married her. And her kids, by then I was in high school. Her kids were a little older than me. Like my sister is 2.5 years older than me. And then I think her youngest was like maybe 2 years older than my sister. And then the next one was like 2.5 years older than him. So the stepbrothers, like, she sold her house to her sons, or one of her sons. So like she ended up moving in with us and didn't bring her kids. But just the idea of like, you're in a second relationship and they're like bringing your kids to live with someone who's not their biological parent. Like even as a child, I was like, that's weird. I will never do that. So I think one of the reasons why I didn't end up married was because I was always very cautious, not really a fan of dating men who had already been married. Um, with kids already, and couple that with the increase of like men wanting one night stands and not wanting relationships. So I never ended up getting married, and I'm certainly at an age at this point I've given up on it.
Well, it was just where I wanted to go with that too. Is it was just the opposite. Like I didn't get married, and I dated for a little while in my 20s, and um, usually I wouldn't go out with somebody who already had kids as well. But on the few occasions that I did, I was meeting those kids
Yeah.
almost immediately every single time, and they were young kids, and wasn't a lot of chance to screw them up at that point. Once they get older, yeah, your chances are a little high, but yeah, it is the difference and some of the failings that I think is happening that's trying to push Gen Z into a more traditionalist state.
Well, and and one of the other things that was weird is it wasn't like just bringing one set of kids to live with their new significant other, but my father had kids and these women had kids. So they would be moving like when I was in elementary school or middle school. These women were the same age as my dad, but my dad had his kids in his 30s, and people back then used to have their kids in their 20s.
Hmm.
So they would be bringing their kids in, and they usually had sons. Actually, all of his girlfriends had sons, and his wife, and they would bring these kids to come live with us, and then these guys would be like, 10 years older than me, and they'd be like bossing me around.
Hmm.
And so that created like another situation. Like in particular, when I was like 10, 11, 12 years old, my dad's girlfriend's son was, I think, 18, I think. He was like late high school.
Hmm.
And my father never like left him in charge of me, but like there was one incident where I was home with a babysitter and I was watching TV, and he came home and he started saying like, I'm older than you, I can like take the TV from you. And I was like, you're not in charge of me. I have my own babysitter. Instead of like even trying to negotiate with my babysitter to get the TV, he just started like fighting with me. And it's like, he's not my sibling, you know, and no like rules regarding how he and I were supposed to interact were ever established, which I think was a little silly. And his girlfriend used to like, I remember one time she flung ice cream at me when my dad wasn't looking. And then when I went to get dad, like the little brat I was, she ran over to me and like wiped it off with a napkin. This happened a few times. So
I think we're way
just
off topic at this point.
a grown woman just sitting there with a spoon going boing with shooting ice cream at a child. Yeah, it happened. Anyway, what were we moving on to 2020, right?
Yeah, Now that we've completely missed that topic entirely, let's talk about what is going to be coming on from the next election, because there have been a couple of interesting little shifts that have gone on. Nobody's got into the race, so we don't have to talk about that, and unfortunately, nobody's got out of the race, so we don't get to talk about that either. But one of the things tying back to what we talked about was the fact that once the Mueller report dropped, mind you, completely saying there's not going to be any more indictments, so they've got nothing to run this on. Elizabeth Warren decided that she was going to be the first person out there to try and push the House into running the articles of impeachment. As a senator, Elizabeth Warren can't do anything directly about it. She would just be on the committee that would try the president and try and convict him and move him to remove from office. But she was trying to push the House of Representatives to get that ball to her court. Did you see any of that?
I think one of the nut jobs, the nut job that I mentioned from Facebook, the leftist, um, he posted something about it because I remember making the wisecrack. She will do 1/24 or 1,024 of an impeachment.
Well, she can't do any of the impeachment. Like I said,
I know
she's got to
it was.
kick that over to the other side. But I mean, she became the first person in relation directly to the Mueller report to try and push that through. Rashida and Ilhan, both, we talked about them earlier, tried to push that, but they were all on her coattails by that point. So
I don't think I think this came out over Passover, so I didn't notice this. But yeah, I made the wisecrack. I mean, and also at some point, like I just expect them to do this, so it's like I barely even notice. Like I see this stuff come out, and I'm like, yeah, whatever. I knew they were gonna do this. Like it says, as blonde from Matt and Blonde would say, like the one show she was like, yeah, whatever. Muslims are gonna Muslim. Like, yeah, whatever. Democrats are gonna Democrat.
yeah. How do you think the Mueller report changes up the stack of the people that are already on the list?
I mean, the usual, they're going to get in the media and posture, but I mean, if you didn't see that coming, like you're not paying attention. Like I just said, most of what they do, I'm just like, yeah, whatever. It doesn't very little surprises me anymore because I see this stuff all the time. I pretty much expected that the report would eventually come out and that well, actually, I thought the investigation would go on the entire time he was president. So the fact that the Mueller report actually came out was surprising to me. But the fact, I always kind of figured if it did come out, that if it came out in his favor, that the Democrats just wouldn't accept it. That I 100% accepted that. Like if you would have told me, okay, the Mueller report is going to come out and it's going to clear Trump, how do you think this is going to go with the Democrats? And I would have told you, okay, well, they're going to throw a fit. They're going to try and say it's not true, or they're going to try and dig little things out of it. Like all of that I could have expected.
Now, I want to point out.
Democrats are Democrat.
What's that?
I said Democrats are going to Democrat.
Well, speaking of Democrats are going to Democrat and the clown car that we have going on with the Democrat Party right now, I want to bring up something that you actually put into the show notes here before we went on, and you were curious for us to talk about people like Tulsi Gabbard and Andrew Yang, who have looks like you say 1,000%. Um,
I said there are a small number of conservatives who are acting like they are real options, and I said they are 1,000% not real options for a conservative to vote for.
yeah. What about
So
let me put one more name on that list because you brought up Tulsi and Andrew Yang, but let's also bring up Eric Swalwell because he's
Eric,
also
you nuke people if they don't give up their guns, Swalwell?
The same.
Yeah, he's a scary motherfucker.
Well, I've talked about this in other circles as well. Talking about
I
the idea that some of these people. What's that?
don't think conservatives are really backing him. So, just saying. The main thing with Tulsi is I think it's a little weird that people are supposedly conservative and backing Tulsi and Yang, but I think that a lot of these people are either like political novices or they don't really know, they're not really paying attention if they're like Tulsi is backed by the baby murder pack political action committee called Emily's List, and I did a video about that on my channel. It's a specific, they back women running on the Democrat line who are pro Planned Parenthood, pro quote unquote choice, pro baby murder. And so if you're getting money from a PAC for that, you're not just voting to maintain what we have. You're expected to vote to push the envelope further and further. I mean, we already have states with third trimester, and we had a governor actually talking about quote unquote fourth trimester. So how much further are we going to take this?
Well, the thing with Tulsi that I've noticed, because you're talking back about the conservative backing of her, Tulsi Gabbard does speak to a little bit of the libertarian side of things that the conservative movement kind of adopted in the last couple of elections. Uh, and that is the isolationist idea of it, because she is very isolationist about that. That's, I think, why some of the conservatives are out there talking about her and trying to say that, okay, she's not going to be the same as all of the rest of these people, is because she wants to get us out of everywhere in the country and just focus on this country. And that
I mean,
is a part of that platform.
he didn't really follow through with it. Although I think that he's still probably been a lot better than what we would have gotten with any other candidate.
Oh, yeah.
I think most of it is he's being pressured by the deep state, tremendously pressured, and the media, of course. So, I mean, I think because if you think about it, we're barely bombing other countries. Like he bombed Syria like two different times that were like a year apart, and the base was not happy about that. But imagine if we had gotten someone like Jeb Bush.
Oh, yeah. Or Hillary, for that matter.
Yeah, exactly. But like, I think the establishment wanted the race to be Hillary versus Jeb Bush. And they probably saw all the comments coming out on like social media where people were like, no, not another Bush Clinton race. But
that was the same year Jumanji was starting to come out, too.
so I think from then on, they were going to try to do like Marco Rubio or Ted Cruz. I think that's what the establishment wanted for like the Republican pick. And right. The establishment did not want Trump to be the one running. But thankfully, a lot of the Republicans have actually finally come around and are backing him up.
Let's talk about Yang for a second, because that's actually not somebody that I've talked about on my show yet, as far as I've been going through this. And I think you're right. I think there is some backing for Yang and his ideas. He's running a very radical agenda, and it's on its face.
I don't think it's his ideas. In his case, I think he's got people who are like on social media and shit posting on his behalf. So I think it's the fact that he's got kind of like that young, fun, populist feel that Trump, even though he's in his 70s, some of the reason why he got the youth appeal was because, the way he shit posts and trolls people and, and one thing about Yang is at least trying to appeal to that sort of a base I don't know if he's really. A lot of the shit posters have kind of checked out too, so they're not really even paying attention. But I know like he had stuff going on where he had a Discord server where he had like supporters there, and they were being like trained to go out and shit post on his behalf and stuff. I believe Millie Weaver from Infowars was the one who published that. I think somebody who was one of the shit posters got backstabbed by the left and like turned around and leaked it to the conservatives as revenge.
Well, the thing with Yang, and this is, I actually had never heard of Andrew Yang prior to this. When I first started my podcast, I had Robert from the Generational Gap, and he was kind of urging me to go and look into Yang. Part of the appeal that he has, and I think he's starting to look at or get attention from both sides because of this, is the fact that a lot of the things that we are doing right now are starting to move into automation. People are talking about self-driving trucks, self-driving cars, and that's something that's been talked about my entire adult life. When GM was starting to teeter, one of my friends who was a big foreign car guy and just a big down with the establishment, down with business kind of guy said, "Well, Toyota will just come out and buy GM and automate the whole thing and put everybody out of work." And he was actually happy about that. But I know a lot of this country is not happy about that. And Andrew Yang seems to have the only idea out there as to how to deal with that without getting big government involved. I know Tucker went on to Shapiro's show and said, well, we'll just put laws into place that say that we're not allowed to automate or anything. And I like the fact that there's an idea out there, but I don't like the fact that it's going to be coming from the government, because we've had industrial innovations before, and the problem with industrial innovations, and the reason that we don't necessarily need to look into a universal basic income, people are going to go out of jobs because they're not going to be able to adapt. But for the most part, our society is going to be able to adapt, and we are going to put everybody back to work again. It's not going to be in a way that we've imagined yet, but we are going to put everyone to work again.
Yeah, I mean, I think universal basic income is a big government kind of idea.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of communism.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and that's the thing is, the political novices don't see a lot of this stuff. You have a lot of people who may seem like they are politically involved because they're on political YouTube channels, but they're just around because they're shit posters.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, like, I guess in a way I kind of started with a little bit of that mentality, but like, I woke up very quickly. Very quickly, I was like doing all kinds of research and doing a lot of research on my own. And I, very early on looked up like, oh my gosh, I don't even know who my congressperson is. So I looked it up. Oh my gosh, I don't even know who like this representative is and that representative. So I know who all these people that represent me are now. But like a couple of years ago when I was politically asleep, I couldn't have told you who my congressperson is. And yet we still have people who are on these political YouTube channels, and they'll make comments like somebody who lives in Manhattan said, I'm not going to vote for AOC. I said, do you live in her district? And they were like, I don't know.
Speaking, and then, I've been wanting to ask you this whole show.
Manhattan's not her district, so it's like, she's not going to be on your, people talking about whether, like, I'm not going to vote for somebody, and they're talking about not voting for somebody who is not going to be on their ballot, or saying I'm going to vote for somebody, and they're talking about someone who is not going to be on their ballot. And it's like, and you ask these people, like, do you know who your congressperson is? They don't even know. Rundle Walk did a video where he actually went out in New York City and asked people, like, who's your state senator? Who's your this? Who's your that? People didn't know, but, like, you would think people who are all over the political YouTube channels would know who their congressperson is.
Yeah.
Like at some point, you need to look that up. I can understand when you first start waking up politically, you may not know that. But eventually, how does it not occur to people, you know what? I don't even know who my congressperson is. Let me open up another tab and click, you know, duck, duck, go. Who is my congressperson? And look it up and figure it out.
Well, you know who my
How did,
congressperson used to be.
what's his name? Paul Ryan?
Yep, I am in Wisconsin 1.
Ah, I figured since you were saying like, ooh, you know who it is. So that's the district where Paul Neyland was going to run. And
Yep.
he dropped out.
Yeah, now we have Ryan Style, I am actually trying to get him on this show too, but his people have not got back to my people yet. I've been wanting to ask you this entire show. Are you in New York 5?
District 5?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's Gregory Meek, right? No, that's not my district.
Oh, New York 5 is Cortez.
Oh, she's in 14.
She in 4? I thought she was in 5.
I'm pretty sure 5 is Gregory Meeks.
Oh. Why was I thinking 5? I don't know. That's not important. I've got two other topics on. I know we're like right up on the clock right now. Do you want to? We can probably quick hit these ones here. Do you want to quick hit these or?
Sure. What's the topics?
The last one was on 2020 Watch. I did want to talk a bit about Sanders being on Fox News, and then I know you had some interest in talking about this Shapiro thing with the WAPO.
Well, yeah, I guess, what they called him a Nazi, right?
Yeah, he was a white supremacist 2 days in a row in the Washington Post.
Do you know if it was the same author?
I don't believe it was.
I mean, I know that Refuse Fascism, aka Revolutionary Communist Party, they started calling him a Nazi September of 2017 when he spoke at Berkeley.
Mm-hmm.
And I did a video about it. It was one of my early videos. Like, oh, I got 100 views, and I was all excited because I wasn't really getting a lot of that on my channel at the time. And it broke 100. I think it ended up at like 300 or something like that. And it still occasionally gets a view here and there. So,
well, you had mentioned you were in the Orthodox community yourself, and I'm sure that you realize that usually Nazis and white supremacists don't really care for people who wear that funny hat that he wears around everywhere that he goes.
right, well, I mean, that's the thing is I've been called a Nazi. And then, so on the one hand, people who are Democrats, whether they're Jewish or not, come at me for being on the right. Mm-hmm. People who are this so-called alt-right come at me for being a Jew. And I've spoken about this on my channel. And a lot more on my second channel. You're a Jew. That's the thing is this expectation. They just say I'm a Jew over and over again as if people are supposed to understand what it means. And it's very similar to how the left will repeatedly be like, she's a Republican. She's a Republican. She's a Trump supporter. She's a Trump supporter. And people are just supposed to understand what that means. I guess it's like a dog whistle, really. But yeah, I mean, I went to a protest against Linda Sarsour. This was, I think, April of 2017. It was run by Pamela Geller. It might have been May. I'm not sure. Around that time. It was run by Pamela Geller, who's Jewish. The headliner speaker was Milo Yiannopoulos, who is he's a non-practicing Jew. I believe he's a practicing Catholic to some extent. And then, of course, he's gay. And then one of the speakers there was Dov Hikind, who is a now retired, but at the time he was still in office. He was a New York assemblyman Democrat Party Orthodox Jew representing a district that's primarily Orthodox. And they called us homophobes. They called us sexist. They called us Nazis. They called us KKK. And yet, most of the people who were at the protest, the speakers, some of the speakers were actual Caucasians, but a lot of the speakers were like ex-Muslims and Jews. And then you have the people who were actually at the rally. You had Latinos for Trump, who they were calling Nazis. They had, a bunch of us Jews. One of the articles that basically called us Nazis, on the front cover, they had a woman who appeared white. She was, what the left calls white passing. Mm-hmm. And she was a light-skinned Hispanic. And they basically, implied that she was a white supremacist.
Well, and being Mexican and by extension Hispanic is not necessarily being a brown person either. I mean, there's a Mexican model that I follow on Instagram who has lighter skin than I do and has blonde hair and blue eyes, but yes, hails from Mexico.
Oh, you're Hispanic?
I am not.
Oh, okay. I don't know what your ancestry is. I'm yeah, he could be white or Hispanic. I mean, it's
German and Nordic.
Yeah. So, meanwhile, Dan Bongino is Italian, and somebody thought he was a mulatto once, which he kind of looks like, but.
Well, let's hit this last topic quick, and then let's get on out of here. Speaking of non-practicing Jews, Bernard Sanders decided recently that he wanted to go over on Fox News. I've been wanting to talk about this for a while, but now that he's actually done it, I think it's the perfect time because even before he went on there were people that were trying to discredit him and trying to discredit Fox News and trying to say that he shouldn't be allowed to go on there because he shouldn't be reaching across to the other side and trying to garner voters. Anybody who would watch Fox News or anybody who would be a Republican is dead to everybody on the left, which is an idea that I completely encourage. But, this was a massive controversy for everybody involved in it. It seemed to go well, and he was actually being asked some hard questions for some of the first time in his life. Did you see anything about this coming into this at all, or?
I probably did. I subscribe to 350 channels at least. So I sit down and I put stuff in watch later and I run the videos and I do it while I'm cooking and stuff like that. So sometimes I don't really see all of a video, but I think I did see videos on that. A lot of them are reaction videos, of course, that show original clips. So I feel like I probably saw a video about it, but I don't remember officially. It all kind of blends together after a while. Let's see. Is this one of the ones where he was saying he wants, I believe there was a clip where he said he wants, the 1%ers to pay their fair share. And they pushed him to get hard numbers, and eventually they got him to admit that he wants the 1% paying 52%. Was that from Fox News?
I believe there was that, and then, it was. They were continuing to push him and show that he does need to reach down into the upper middle class as well, which I think is a part of the I don't think necessarily, and hear me out on this. Notice when Cortez goes on shows, she never goes on anything right-leaning, and she never goes anywhere where somebody is actually going to ask her a hard question. Yeah, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has been invited on this show before she was even famous. Right when she won the primary, I reached out to her and said, I want to talk to you about your ideas because I am a very big supporter of freshman politicians. I had no idea where any of that was going to go, and any of her campaign was going to go after that, but I reached out to her. Shapiro has reached out to her. So many countless other people on the right have reached out to her and asked her to come on our shows and discuss the issues, but she won't do it. Now,
Well,
Bernie's.
after she said Shapiro was catcalling her, I know Liz Wheeler also offered her money, and she was like, "I'm a woman, so I'm not catcalling you. Come on my show. The show will give you $10,000. You know, da 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 da." And Liz Wheeler got no response, and I believe there was a female from Fox News who reached out to her.
Mhm. Well, first off, most of the people on the left are demonizing Fox News as something horrific. It's propaganda, it's slander, it's
Which
this,
is
that, and
hilarious because OANN is substantially more conservative. Fox News is a joke compared to the YouTubers and the except for like Tucker and Bill O'Reilly, like the five, some of them will actually like speak up for conservative principles.
yeah.
But there's a few of them that they're like, "You're a conservative,
Well, yeah,
okay?"
I've written an article for Cora in answer to somebody's question that said, the question was, what's the left wing equivalency of Fox News? And I started out my answer. Well, first we have to assume that Fox News is right wing, because it's not.
Yeah, I guess the closest would be CBS
Yeah.
because CBS is until like this whole the good fight thing. I would say that they were probably the tamest of the left wing mainstream media. But after like this commercial that came out, I'm like, I don't know if I can say that now. That
Well,
was pretty freaking crazy.
well, I want to go back and just talk about this thing with Bernie here because, I mean, on the outside, the way that the people are talking about it, when they are talking about it, they're talking about balkanization and everybody who voted for Trump is dead and we don't want their votes. We don't want them in our club anymore, which is a horrible way to run a campaign. But I completely encourage the idea.
Yeah,
So
never
that's
interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake.
but the other side of it. I look at this. I look at the questions that Bernie got asked, and I looked at the fact that people like Warren and Cortez and Ilhan Omar have been invited to go on to other outlets like this that will ask them the hard questions, and they refuse. And even they'll go further than refusing and start name calling for the fact that they won't go on to there. Bernie Sanders was going on an outlet that was going to ask him the hard questions, and he was either going to have to lie or he was going to have to reveal the agenda. And I don't think they want us to know the agenda. I think that they just want everyone to fall in. I think that's a big part of the reason that this is actually a controversy.
I think the real reason is that a lot of the politicians are puppets being controlled and they don't know how to answer these questions on the spot.
Yeah.
Especially with somebody like AOC. That's especially true of her. I mean, if you look at Candace Owens has come into her own, but when she first came out, she wouldn't go on anything where she was going to be challenged. She got softballed her questions too.
I can't
And
argue that.
I actually heard that one of the leftists, that a leftist show actually tried to debate her when she was first becoming popular, and the show was more than big enough that she should have wanted to go on. And her handlers basically told the person, she's not ready for this. But after the way she held her own in the congressional hearing recently, I would say she's figured it out.
Yeah.
And I loved that she told them she was offended. I loved that. Because that's what they do to us. I was actually want to do a video and I was going to call it Weaponize Offendedness.
Well, and you can't really be afraid to go over to the other side, no matter what it is you're doing. I'll be talking with Stephen Ignoramus tonight, on the night that we're recording, not the night that we're releasing. I'll be
Right.
talking with him because I was even planning just recently to go and run a campaign of my own. I was going to run against Baldwin for the Senate seat that was open last year, but things happened and I wasn't able to do that. But one of the first shows that I went on that wasn't my own show was a half and half show, a conservative millennial and a liberal Gen Xer.
Ah.
And Robert put me through the ringer. He asked me all of the tough questions, and I stood back and hung with him. Just a tiny YouTuber. Never really been challenged like that. Well, I have been challenged before like that in my life because I live as close to Madison as I live, and I spend a lot of time up there. So Madison is. You talked about Milwaukee a little bit off camera, but Madison makes Milwaukee look like a right wing stronghold. Trust me. So yeah, it's important that we don't get softball like that, or that we don't let ourselves get softball. We don't let our handlers decide what we can and cannot say. And I do think that's a part of I think the people are stepping in trying to keep Sanders from going out and actually having to answer a real question.
Right. So, just looking at the Stephen ignoring this guy. He's on the left? Is that what you're saying? No. He's
Steven is not.
followers that I know, so no.
Steven's kind of a center rightish. He's kind of like probably about where I am, maybe, um, but we are going to talk about the idea that I was planning on running. So
Yeah. So yeah, I've done a couple debates. I did a debate against someone from the alt. Well, I've mostly debated the alt right.
mhm.
I think only debated the alt right. I used to call in to an alt right call in show, and they loved putting me on because like they would let me debate whoever else was a guest, and it would let things go fiery. So eventually I left the Discord server and stopped calling. It wasn't really a call in show on the phone, but you would go
Yeah,
into the Discord, and um I stopped going on to there. But and some other, like, I don't know if you've heard of Luke Ford. There's a woman who would come on, and I would end up kind of debating her because she was trying to push secular Quranism, and she was trying to be sneaky and pretend like she was some sort of ally to the Christians, and then she would tell them, "Yeah, but Christianity is not working. You need to be a secular Quranist." And so I would pipe right in and call her out on what she was, because she was trying to pull a fast one on what she was trying to pull. And so it would be like kind of a low key debate. Um, and then I actually did a couple of like actual debates. One was Zionism. So I was for and somebody else was against.
hmm
Um, and I mean, I would say that I won that debate, so to speak, simply because the guy really, there was a lot of stuff that he kept saying, well, this, and I'm like, no, it's this. And I'd be like, and he would look, and he would go and he would like Google it while we were debating. He'd be like, oh, you're right. I didn't even prepare for that. So that in was kind of impressive that I was able to remember all of that stuff just from research that I just did, because I don't know how you'd necessarily, I guess I could search for like pro Zionist stances, but you don't know what they're going to bring up. And
hmm
he was the one bringing stuff up, and I was the one counter punching it. And then I also did a debate, civic nationalism versus white nationalism. And that was the last debate I did because my computer was failing me. I had two computers, and then one of them died, and I was stuck completely only on one computer. And that computer had no fan, and so it was overheating all the time. And then eventually that computer died, and so then I had to buy another computer. So, but yeah. So I've done a couple of debates. I haven't really gotten. I mean, I guess since I got the other computer and kind of got back into YouTubing, I've still not really like hit the kind of swing that I was in before that. I had all these guests lined up when my computer died. It was horrible. It was a horror. I was like really hitting a stride where I had like the computer died before the second computer died before the civic nationalism debate, and I tried to cancel that, but then she like shamed me all over social media. So I caved and did the debate anyway with the computer that was like in really bad shape. So
Well, we're almost at 2 hours here, so
yeah,
why
yeah,
don't you say we get through the outro here and
yeah.
Get on with our
So
days.
yeah. So my hobbies outside of politics would be like cooking and graphics. Really like making my thumbnails and stuff. Paint.net. So
That's awesome. Maybe one day we'll get
more
a.
of the food than the cooking of it,
Yeah.
actually.
Well, thanks for coming on the show today. That was really awesome for you. Thanks to the audience for listening, and hopefully, thanks for the new audience that's going to come in because you said you're going to redo this on your channel.
Yep.
Remember, if you're looking at this, you're stumbling across us for the first time, make sure you reach down and you hit that subscribe button below. Hit that thumbs up button. That helps us move up the algorithms, and leave us a comment. We always answer back on the comment section. If you're listening back on the audio platforms later, thank you again. Make sure you subscribe over there, and if you're on iTunes, make sure you leave us a 5-star review and a good rating because that, again, helps us move up the algorithms. AC, why don't you plug your channel and your social media right away?
So you can search me Analytical Chick. I'll put a comment on this video so that you can go from there to my channel. And then in my About tab, I have all my other links. I know my Twitter is Analytical Chick without the K, and then there's a 1 instead. So yeah.
And of course, take some time and while you're over on Twitter and check me out. That is at Eds Blog Twitter with a 1 in place of the I. As you go forward and you listen to this and you draw your conclusions about what happens, make sure that you don't take the words of bloggers, podcasters, or journalists as gospel. Find all the facts and draw your own conclusions.
Oh,
AC, you have last word.
I was gonna say yes. I always spot check the YouTubers that I watch myself. At least spot check them to see more or less if I should be able to trust them.
You have last word.
Thanks for stopping by whichever channel you're on, and we'll see you next time.
Take care.